So just to give you a little bit of an idea of where I'm coming from, I'm a philosophy professor at IE University in Spain, where I hold the UNESCO chair in AI ethics and governance. Previously, I've been a fellow at Stanford PACS, the Center on Philanthropy and Civil Society. I've been a fellow at the Oxford Institute for Ethics and AI, among other institutions. Outside of my academic work, I also serve as a strategic advisor to organizations trying to navigate the ethical frontiers of technology, business, philanthropy. My talk today will be mostly about high-level academic topics, but I'm very happy to talk more technically about some of the advisory work I do during coffee or lunch, if you're interested. I was born and raised in the United States, in New York, but I've been based for the last 6 years in Germany, which helps to explain why I'm not speaking in Spanish, even though I'm working in Spain. Estoy aprendiendo español. Thank you for your patience and understanding. So the plan for today is to do 5 things. I'm going to be asking, or really answering, how philosophers understand the ethics of philanthropy. And then I'm going to transition to the topic of artificial intelligence. I'll talk about definitions of AI, uses of AI, and the ethical risks and challenges that artificial intelligence confronts us with. I'll talk about some of the resources already in existence for managing some of these risks. I'll make a proposal about how the field of philanthropy and social private investment can respond to some of these challenges. And I'll offer you some resources for further thinking after the talk. So, the ethics of philanthropy. The term philanthropy, I suppose maybe is in more common usage in the English-speaking world. I think it's a term that we're using similarly when we talk about social private investment, but maybe there's some key differences. But scholars of philanthropy typically understand philanthropy to mean practices based in the donation of private resources for public-facing purposes. We can argue about that definition later. There's some ways in which it doesn't accurately describe many of the things that we now mean by philanthropy, or some of the things we may wish to analyze in a sort of neighboring category. But the ethics of philanthropy is concerned with the evaluation and guidance of philanthropic activity. And it's a conversation that all of us engage in, or have engaged in at some time in our lives. We are asking questions like, who should engage in philanthropy? What purposes should they seek to promote? How much should different agents contribute? What motives should they have when engaging in philanthropy? Is philanthropy only good when it comes from a good intention? Or can we integrate self-interested reasons into our philanthropic giving, such as profit? What strategies should be used when engaging in philanthropic activity? So these are the kinds of questions that we ask when we're interested in evaluating, judging, or guiding philanthropic activity. And of course, the philosophers have been engaged in these questions for thousands of years, since Aristoteles in Español, and perhaps even earlier than that. But in the last 15 or so years, there have been 2 dominant trends in the philosophical study of philanthropy. One area of research, one area of controversy has been this topic of effective altruism. Effective altruism is a philosophical school of thought and a social movement dedicated to the idea that everyone should maximize their marginal contributions to global well-being by drawing on rigorous reasoning and evidence. Now, if you've been in this field for a few years, you know that attention to outcomes, to empirical measurement, to program evaluation is not a new idea. This is something that's been discussed and debated and promoted for many years in the field of philanthropy and the nonprofit sector. Effective altruism adds some moral premises to this idea and has a specific methodology about how one is supposed to analyze and direct one's giving on quantitative terms. So this is a theory, a school of thought associated with people like Peter Singer, with William McCaskill and others. It has inspired many organizations, especially in the United States, United Kingdom, but with chapters worldwide. Organizations such as GiveWell, which is an organization that rates nonprofits based on how much they contribute to global well-being, how effective they are. The Open Philanthropy Foundation, which is a foundation focused on grant making in response to effective altruist ideas. 80,000 Hours, which is an organization focused on helping people make career choices that do the most that they can for the world. Giving What We Can, which is an organization focused on getting rich people to commit to giving as much money away as possible, and several others. This school of thought, this movement, has been subject to numerous critiques and debates by philosophers and others. And it all sort of came to a head with the conviction of Sam Bankman-Fried and the collapse of FTX. I don't know if you followed this scandal, but Sam Bankman-Fried was a cryptocurrency entrepreneur. He was found guilty of defrauding his investors of more than $1 billion. Sam Bankman-Fried claimed that he engaged in this criminal enterprise out of a concern for effective altruism. His purpose was to make as much money as possible in sketchy ways so that he could eventually give this money away and do much more for the world. Now, many people look at this example as an indication of exactly what's wrong with effective altruism, and the movement is trying to adapt and recover from that scandal. I guess the future will be told later. So effective altruism has been one trend in research in philosophical work in philanthropy. Another trend has been focused on the question of power. The idea that the ethical assessment of philanthropy or nonprofit enterprise should focus not only on outcomes and motives, but also on power relations. Also on the power between donors and recipients, the power between donors and intermediary organizations, the power between donors and other donors, and the power between donors and citizens more generally. Now, my recent work fits into this second category of interrogating the power relations involved in philanthropy. I published a book a few years ago called The Tyranny of Generosity: Why Philanthropy Corrupts Our Politics and How We Can Fix It. It's a book that investigates the relationship between philanthropy and democratic ideas. The basic idea of the book is that philanthropy can support democracy in certain key ways by funding discretionary public goods and promoting civic engagement, but it can also undermine philanthropy in certain ways that we may not always realize. Philanthropy can threaten or corrode democracy by privatizing public responsibilities and widening inequalities in power. So the book suggests some ways of overcoming these problems, and it also illustrates how studying philanthropy can help us to understand why democracy itself is valuable and what democracy requires of us. Now, since the book, I've been engaged in a few follow-up research projects, which I'll highlight just because I think they may be interesting to some of you. I've been investigating questions such as, under what conditions should corporations engage in boycotts or other forms of political activism? I've been investigating how can social entrepreneurship contribute to a just society. I just published a piece on this in the Stanford Social Innovation Review yesterday. I've been investigating the ethical foundations of corporate social responsibility and the limitations of corporate social responsibility from a philosophical perspective. Most of my studies are available in a free version on my website, if you're interested. I'll also be sharing these slides or allowing the team to share these slides with anybody who's interested afterwards. And so I'll also be suggesting some resources for further reading and some toolkits at the end of this talk. So, what I want to do today, or for the rest of this discussion, is to draw some connections between philanthropy and artificial intelligence, which is another area of research and concern for me, and I'm sure something that is of intense interest to many of you. So, what is artificial intelligence? I define AI as artifacts that engage in cognitive tasks with varying degrees of independence from human programming. So these are machines that we make, we as humans create them, to do various things, but in ways that we don't have total control over. Right? That's what makes AI both interesting, powerful, and in some ways problematic. There are different forms of AI. The dominant form of AI sometimes is called narrow AI, and this refers to AI that performs specific tasks. So you can think of weather prediction algorithms, you can think of spam filtering in your email, you can think of algorithms to make credit and loan decisions, autonomous driving, all forms of narrow AI. Of course, in the past few years, we've seen the development of something a little bit more powerful, with a little bit more breadth, which I'm calling multi-purpose AI. And this refers to AI models or AI systems that perform various tasks, usually related to content generation and analysis. Tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, things you've probably heard of, maybe used on a daily basis in some cases. So those are the forms of AI that are currently in existence, and then there are forms of AI that are merely hypothesized, hoped for in some cases and feared in others. Artificial general intelligence, if it could be created, would refer to human-level intelligence, human-level AI that can learn without training and can choose its own goals. So there's a debate about whether this is possible, when it might be possible, whether it's desirable. If you've seen the movie Her, I think it's Ella in Espanol, with Scarlett Johansson, or Star Trek, the character Data, these are perhaps examples of artificial general intelligence, forms of AI that rival the ability of humans to do various intelligent tasks. And then we have something potentially even more powerful, which is called superintelligence. Superintelligence refers to AI that not only rivals human intelligence, but exceeds human intelligence in virtually every domain. So if you've seen the Stanley Kubrick film 2001, A Space Odyssey, the computer system HAL 9000 might be an example of superintelligence. If you've seen The Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator character might be an example of superintelligence. Again, lots of debate about whether this is possible, and most people are concerned that if it is possible, it's definitely not desirable because of the threats that this might pose to humans and human civilization. So those are the various forms of AI. Why are we developing this technology? Well, obviously enough, AI allows us to perform many tasks faster, cheaper, and sometimes more accurately and more fairly than conventional methods. So I want to highlight just a few use cases, some of which are obviously amazing, some of which are more controversial. So in health or in healthcare, we're using AI to automate the discovery of treatments, automate diagnostic procedures, to offer more personalized treatments, to to develop telemedicine options so that we can send doctors or clinicians remotely to various places in the world that are more difficult to reach. Just some examples, the Instituto Nacional de Salud de Colombia is using AI to predict the spread of dengue fever throughout Colombia. Google DeepMind, which is based in London, has created models to simulate biochemistry interactions, which allows it to discover diseases, or discover the causes of diseases and potential cures of diseases much faster, much more comprehensively than conventional human analytic methods. In agriculture, we can use AI to promote precision farming techniques based on satellite images and weather data, such as the company S4 AgTech in Argentina. In environmental conservation, we can detect deforestation using predictive algorithms. This is what a company called Amazon in Brazil is doing, and an organization called Viva in Costa Rica is detecting illegal fishing using AI models. So here's an example of a heat map produced by Amazon, where it's detecting where deforestation is most likely to occur based on these data sets, and then it can then send or alert the authorities or move resources to these particular areas as a result. There are many other areas where AI can and does make a difference. So in banking, AI can and is increasingly used for the detection of fraud, for making credit decisions, for robo-advising. In public administration and law enforcement, you can use AI to determine the distribution of benefits, to process immigration cases, to engage in predictive policing. Education, AI offers personalized learning opportunities so that we can analyze each student's strengths and weaknesses. It also offers, in some cases, widened access for marginalized populations. We may be able to send AI tutors to students who do not have access to a regular teacher. I'll come back to that idea in a moment. Transportation, we can automate vehicles. We can analyze the flow of traffic and optimize the flow of resources. In many commercial operations, AI allows us to automate processes of employee recruitment and selection. We can transcribe meetings and summarize meetings with the help of AI tools. In manufacturing, AI allows us to substitute humans in labor-intensive and dangerous and repetitive tasks, not without controversies, for reasons we'll see in a second. And finally, in the area of cultural preservation, AI is very helpful for preserving indigenous languages. It can reconstruct indigenous languages from fragments of those languages, as well as help to preserve indigenous languages by offering translation tools. So there's recently an AI chatbot created in the Quechua language to allow Quechua speakers to have access to news and translation opportunities. Interesting project. So these are some of the many uses of AI in different sectors of society. Some of these are obviously beneficial, life-changing, but of course, AI comes with many ethical risks and dilemmas. So what are some of these risks? Well, most obviously are global inequalities, the widening of global inequalities. So most of the infrastructure, most of the scientific resources, and most of the control of AI are concentrated in the global north. But of course, the biggest needs, as well as some of the worst negative impacts predicted for AI, are concentrated in the global south. Thinking also about more local inequalities, AI has the potential to widen many inequalities within countries. It's likely to be the case that dominant populations within countries, the more educated, the richer, the more privileged urban populations, are going to be able to take advantage of AI, while other populations, less educated, rural populations, are likely to fall even further behind if we do nothing. Right? The problem of bias is a tremendous challenge. So AI can produce biased outcomes from a variety of different sources. Often the data is not representative. If we're using data that's not representative, we're going to get outcomes that are skewed in some way. If we're training our models based on the data from our real world, and our real world is full of injustice, that injustice will show up in the results of our models as well. We can reproduce or intensify pre-existing injustice using AI in various ways. And of course, those who program these models have their own preferences and judgments. Whether intentionally or otherwise, the programmers of AI models may introduce additional forms of bias into the system. There are also worries about the accuracy and reliability of AI systems. So many of the tools and uses of AI offer us speed and convenience, but at the cost of quality. So many of these tools perform worse than expert humans at the same tasks. So there's a worry about using AI in education, in medicine, or in the judiciary, where these tools may offer something to people who would not otherwise have access to a judge, to a tutor, etc., but at much lower quality. We worry about a sort of two-track world where the rich and educated populations continue to have access to human doctors, to human teachers, and the rest of the world is forced to deal with low-quality robots. Another concern is explainability. So these models are so complicated, so complex, that even their designers cannot fully understand how they work. In many cases, we're unable to figure out why a particular decision was made. And that matters when we're making serious decisions about people's lives. When we're making decisions about whether somebody goes to jail or not, making decisions about whether somebody is entitled to welfare benefits or not, whether somebody should have access to credit or not. It seems like in those cases we really should be able to explain why somebody was denied or offered a benefit. And AI often prevents us from offering those kinds of explanations, for understanding the outcomes of those decisions. There are extreme risks of data privacy. So because of the many opportunities that AI offers, particularly in the business world, there are very strong incentives to gather up as much data as possible, even when this comes at the cost of the privacy rights of individuals. Job displacement. So we can imagine many categories of jobs becoming obsolete if current trends continue. We're seeing right now in the United States a major strike in the ports with the longshoremen, the people who unload goods from ships, are striking in large part out of a fear of having their jobs automated by AI in the future. We can imagine future dislocations in the labor market, and there's a question about, are there certain jobs that we as a society should try to preserve? And if not, what do we owe the people whose lives are disrupted by the arrival of AI? There are questions about safety and risk distribution. Some of these systems contain possibilities of physical harm, such as autonomous vehicles. We need to make decisions about whose lives to prioritize in the road, on highways. There are problems of responsibility gaps. So when we delegate power from humans to machines, it's often not clear whose responsibility it is when something goes wrong. Do we blame the people who designed the machine, the people who operate the machine, the people who provided the data for the machine, or do we blame the machine itself? Neither one of those answers is fully satisfying, such that it could be the case where nobody is fully responsible, nobody is blameworthy for something that goes wrong. And finally, there are problems of crime and oppression. These tools are quite powerful. They are of great interest to criminals, to criminal enterprises, and great interest to other powerful organizations, to dictators, to employers who may wish to use these tools to strengthen their own power, to oppress the vulnerable and the innocent. So AI confronts us with many opportunities and many challenges. Fortunately, we do not have to navigate all of these challenges on our own. In the past 4 years or so, there's been a tremendous growth in an organizational ecosystem that is trying to guide us through these problems. Organizations at many different levels which are trying to map out the different risks of AI, propose ways of handling these risks, and suggest possible policies and implementation guidelines. So this is happening among multilateral organizations such as UNESCO. It's also happening with national governments, partly as a result of UNESCO's leadership. There are standard-setting organizations which are offering technical standards for these different systems and how they can be managed within organizations, such as the International Standards Organization. Professional associations, corporations, and think tanks have all been developing sets of guidelines for the development and use of AI. But what's interesting, at least in the research that I did in preparation for our discussion today, is that there have been very few resources developed by or directed to philanthropy and the nonprofit sector. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. I want to say something about UNESCO's leadership in this area, not only because I have a partnership with UNESCO, but because I think UNESCO really does offer some excellent resources which may be of interest and use to you in your professional capacities. So UNESCO has really been taking the lead worldwide in galvanizing support and resources for the idea of ethical AI. This started with the publication of the recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence, which was adopted in 2021 unanimously by all member states. And this provides a global framework for AI ethics, grounded in human rights, in democracy, in inclusion, and several other widely accepted values. The recommendation calls upon UNESCO's member states to develop national strategies for implementing, regulating, and adapting to AI. UNESCO calls upon all of us to try to leverage the benefits of AI while minimizing, reducing, and fairly distributing the risks. One of the things I like about this recommendation is the robust definition that it offers for AI ethics, which is quite a long statement, but I think we should read it all out loud together. Care to join me? Aborda la ética en la IA como una reflexión normativa sistemática basada en la marca integral, global, multicultural y cognitivo de valores, principios y acciones independientes que puede guiar a las sociedades en la hora de afrontar de manera responsable los efectos conocidos y desconocidos de las tecnologías, la IA en los seres humanos, las sociedades, medio ambiente y los ecosistemas, y les ofrece una base para aceptar o rechazar las tecnologías de la IA. Now, what I like about this definition is that it does not understand AI ethics as a set of commandments or a set of principles that is dictated to us from some set of authorities. It understands AI ethics as an ongoing conversation, an ongoing inclusive conversation, a process of deliberation, which gives us the resources to decide whether to accept or reject certain technologies or certain uses of technologies. And I think that is a very sophisticated and helpful understanding of the ethics of artificial intelligence. So, UNESCO offers some resources for the implementation of this recommendation. These include tools for assessing and monitoring AI systems, including a readiness assessment methodology, which is really directed at national governments to understand their gaps and strengths, their preparedness for implementing the UNESCO recommendation, their preparedness for leveraging the benefits of AI and managing the risks. It also offers an ethical impact assessment methodology, which is directed also at member states, but is broadly useful. It's useful also for organizations of all kinds to be able to make systematic ethical assessments of their adoption of AI within their work. UNESCO also has convened some subsidiary bodies, the UNESCO AI Experts Without Borders group, of which I am a member. This is a group of experts that goes around the world offering technical assistance to organizations and member states on managing ethical risks of AI and leveraging opportunities of AI, as well as a business council, which includes groups like Salesforce, Microsoft, Telefonica, LG, and other companies, all of which are attempting to develop best practices for companies to use AI responsibly within their organizations. And UNESCO also produces periodic thematic reports on different topics, including a recent report on AI and indigenous peoples, which I think is particularly relevant in the Latin American context. As well as a recent report on AI and democracy. All of these resources you can find easily on UNESCO's website if you're interested. So, as I said, there's limited research, limited resources available on the role of philanthropy or the role of private social investment in bringing about a future of ethical AI. And in preparing for this talk, I was surprised to find only 2 research papers on this topic, one of which was written by a student, and the other of which seems to have been written by ChatGPT. Just to give you a sense of the gap here in research. So what I've tried to do is some reflection of my own on what might be some roles for philanthropic organizations in promoting ethical AI, in contributing to a future of ethical AI. And I've come up with 5 different roles, which I'd love your thoughts on at some point. So it seems to me that one obvious role for philanthropic organizations is to identify and scale AI applications for social impact. There already is a field called AI for Good, which is focused precisely on this question. What are the best uses of AI for the world, for society, for our communities? Can we identify and scale those uses of AI? So that's one, I think, obvious role for philanthropic organizations. Another thing that philanthropic organizations might do is mitigate the harms and inequalities created by AI, the dislocations, whether that it's preventing certain AI harms from happening by developing resources that can withstand some of those dislocations, or it's responding after the fact to job displacement, to growing inequalities, etc. That seems like another role where philanthropic organizations can step in. A third thing I suggest that philanthropic organizations can do is to integrate AI into their own work and to do so in responsible ways. So philanthropic organizations are organizations like any other organization, and like any organization, they have various operational needs, the recruitment of staff, the evaluation of staff, meeting transcriptions, various administrative tasks could be optimized or improved with the use of AI. That seems obvious. But also, philanthropic organizations, I believe, can use AI to enhance some of their programmatic work, to assist in project selection or project evaluation or impact assessment. If you are receiving thousands and thousands of applications for grants or for projects, AI might help to analyze certain features of those projects to make that process faster, more efficient, and in some ways fairer. But of course, we need to be very cautious about what that might mean. So integrating AI into programmatic work is one option here. But I think it's important, it's especially important, that philanthropic organizations, in adopting AI, hold themselves to the best ethical practices for AI development and deployment. Right? There's a very strong worry that philanthropic organizations might be particularly exposed by using AI in a irresponsible or careless way, often hold philanthropic organizations to a higher ethical standards because they seek social benefit. So I'll suggest some resources in a second that I think may help. So beyond integrating AI into philanthropic work in a responsible manner, there are a few other roles for philanthropic organizations. One, of course, is to engage in advocacy and policy engagement to ensure that governments and corporations are doing their jobs, that governments are managing the AI transition responsibly, and that corporations are doing so as well. So philanthropic organizations can devote resources to protesting AI-related injustice. They can support marginalized voices in AI policy and regulation. They can fund social impact evaluations of public policies. So when governments are creating different policies or regulations about AI, we want to know whether those are effective or what effects they're having. Engaging in those kinds of evaluation activities might be an area where philanthropic organizations can contribute. And finally, I think that philanthropic organizations can contribute to capacity building through collaboration and education. They can bring experts together, bring organizations together to talk about common challenges, common opportunities, best practices, etc. To share knowledge about artificial intelligence and its ethical strengths and weaknesses. So events like FIR is one example of how that can happen. Right? This is a great opportunity for some of those conversations to develop. So I said I would leave you with some resources, and I've come up with a few toolkits that are available. Of course, they are in English. As far as I know, they're developed, all three of them, in the United States, but they claim to be directed at a global audience. So I'll leave them here for whatever it's worth. There's an organization called NetHope, which has developed a toolkit on AI ethics for nonprofits. There's an organization called the Technology Association of Grantmakers, which has produced an initial framework on responsible AI adoption in philanthropy. And Microsoft, just a few weeks ago, has produced an AI governance framework for nonprofits, which offers a range of different resources. Microsoft did not produce this entirely on its own. It did this in collaboration with a few other organizations. Of course, Microsoft has some strong conflicts of interest in this area, so you may want to take these resources with a grain of salt, but I leave them here for whatever they're worth. I'm also suggesting a few books that may be of interest to you. Again, unfortunately, in English. This book by Reed Blackman is a book that I assign to most of my students. It's called Ethical Machines, Your Concise Guide to Totally Unbiased, Transparent, and Respectful AI. So Reed Blackman is a former philosopher who now advises organizations on responsible AI programs and frameworks. A more philosophical collection of articles edited by philosopher Matthew Lau, The Ethics of Artificial Intelligence, is a deeper dive into some of these issues. And a new book that just came out a week ago, and in fact I haven't actually read it yet, but I'm certain that it's going to be good, so I'm recommending it nonetheless, which is called AI Snake Oil: What Artificial Intelligence Can Do, What It Can't, and How to Tell the Difference. This is by two computer scientists at Princeton who are trying to cut through the AI hype. They don't buy a lot of the hype around generative AI and large language models. And they also argue that although there's so much excitement and discussion about the possibility of artificial general intelligence and more sophisticated forms of AI, these narrower forms of AI that are already in existence are likely to have a much bigger impact on society, and that's where our focus should lie. So those are a few resources for whatever they're worth. I'll be around for the next few days if anyone would like to talk more about anything in this talk. There's so many different threads we could pick up. There are so many different intersections between my research and many of the things that you do. So I'm very much looking forward to those conversations. Hoping to keep in touch, of course, on LinkedIn and other ways. Thank you again so much for having me.